Welcome back to Health Day. We hope that you enjoyed the lunch and the visiting. And there's a reminder to please complete the evaluation forms. They're the blue forms on that you got in your packet. And also, besides the evaluation, we'd like you to give us suggestions for next year. Our programs tend to come from the many suggestions that we get from people, and the topics have been wonderful this year. We use those selections, so please do that. With that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, and this is Dr. Sally Lusk, and she's going to talk about noise is damaging your body. Dr. Lusk served as a faculty member in the School of Nursing for 35 years. During that time, her research studies found that as the levels of noise exposure increased, the factory workers' blood pressure and heart rate increased. Through tests of computer-based education, workers' use of hearing protection was increased. Following her retirement, Dr. Lusk has focused on the effects of and the reduction of environmental noise. To that end, she became active in several organizations, Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environment, and serves on the advisory board for Noise-Free America and Quiet Communities. She has led a team in the American Academy of Nursing to publish 2 papers on the policies needed to reduce noise to improve health. She has a modest goal for the rest of her retirement. It is to change the world and to make it quiet. Please welcome Dr. Sally Lusk, and she will speak about how she is trying to change the world and keep us healthier by making the world quieter. Sally?
Thank you, Pat. And thank you for helping me with my mission. I remember Vic Strecker is talking about how important it is to have a purpose. Well, you heard what my purpose is. And the more people I can talk to about it, the better. And this past couple of years when I've had contact with healthcare professionals, I've asked them, do you know about what noise does to the body? No, they didn't. It wasn't in their curriculum when they went to med school. So that's why I wanted to tell the world about it. And I can appreciate having this audience and hope that you'll go forth and tell other people too.
Sally?
Yes.
Mike, put it up to your face, please.
What's that? Up more?
Yeah, when you turn your head, we can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
I know you don't want noise, but...
Exactly. Okay. Oh, I did hear I could take it out, but should I do that?
If you want to hang on to the base plate.
Oh, the base, okay. I'll try that. See if I can handle that. How's that? Okay. Always have a little trouble knowing just how close to have it. So, I'm going to talk about the noise, what it is, how we're not currently paying attention to it a little more, how our bodies are damaged, what's going on in the world in regard to this, what diseases does it contribute to, what are its effects on other than humans, and what can we do about it? I'm interested after the end for questions, and at the end of the time, questions and suggestions. So when we're talking about noise, it's defined as an unwanted or harmful sound. Environmental noise, which is now what I'm focusing on, is unwanted and or harmful outdoor sound created by human-machine activity. Well, I highlighted in caps the outdoor because I really believe that not all of it is outdoors. Some of it's in venues like the football stadium, which is sort of outdoors, or movie theaters, or concerts, or whatever. So whatever noise levels that are harmful, outdoors and indoors, I think are equally important. So here's some of the environmental noise that everybody's very aware of, their sources. And also, it's a public health problem, it's an environmental justice problem, and it's an environmental problem. And we'll talk more about how that's the case. So currently ignored information. Way back in 1968, the Surgeon General was very smart about this, and he said calling noise a nuisance is like calling smog an inconvenience. Noise must be considered a hazard to the health of people everywhere. He also indicated that it's a public health problem, should be a matter of public health concern, aside from hearing loss, which most people nowadays are very aware of, but I'm going to share about noise on the rest of the body. Its aircraft and other sources cause physiological changes, including cardiovascular, which we know what that is, and we'll talk more about that. Glandular, I'm not sure what he meant by glandular. Maybe somebody else knows what that terminology really referred to. And respiratory effects reflective of generalized stress reaction. He was very, very smart. This hadn't been proven in the labs yet in the research. So in 1972 then, our US Congress passed legislation that there was a policy to promote an environment for all Americans free from noise that jeopardizes their health or welfare. And that law still stands. But it's not happening. It's a noisy, 50 years later, it's a noisier world. There's no effective federal policy. The lack of awareness of the public health and environmental hazards, a loss of US leadership. Europe is so far ahead of us in this regard. It's not been paid attention to in the US. And so there are widespread threats to health and environment, and we know there are over 100 million Americans at risk of this noise exposure and damage. So just calling it an annoyance is really misstating what's happening, and that's what I hope to share with you. It is a serious public health problem. Now, how are the bodies damaged? Well, you're well aware of the hearing. Most people know loud noises can destroy hearing and cause tinnitus. And hyperacusis is a newer diagnostic term. I believe I have it because noise bothers me. And if noise bothers you, causes you headache or pain or whatever when you're exposed to it, like in a noisy restaurant, in the movie theater, etc., concert venues, then you can use this term for yourself, hyperacusis. And we know that noise-induced hearing loss contributes to falls, depression, social isolation, and dementia with the noise-induced hearing loss. So it also causes, for those still working, reduced work productivity and reduced quality of life. Quality of life instances have been identified as not being able to hear what your grandkids are saying. I'm going this summer to see about a hearing aid because I have more trouble hearing my grandkids nowadays. And increased healthcare and societal costs. In terms of the costs, when dollars speak to people, so that's why I'm trying to share the cost information, even though it may not be coming out of your pockets, it does come out of societal costs. Hearing loss is the third most common chronic condition in the US. 48 million people with hearing loss as a minimum. And they are also estimating, and I get questions sometimes about the ear pod type things, and 50% of the younger people, and we know hearing loss is happening more frequently in younger people. 50% could be exposed to unsafe levels of sound from personal audio devices. Approximately 40% of persons may be exposed to potentially damaging sound level at at entertainment venues, and that's what I was talking about too. I have my own personal earplugs. One of the first things I do in movie theaters is put them in because it's too loud for me, And particularly when you have to watch the trailers and the commercials for what food you can buy at those exorbitant costs. My bias. And also decrease in work productivity. Now this, I don't expect you to really follow. It's complex and it's small print, but it's there to show you what the researchers have found and discovered and know is a fact. That there is a noise exposure response, and it affects directly the ears and indirectly the other systems of the body, causing a stress response. And then the risk factors that occur due to that stress response are the increase in blood pressure, decrease in cardio output, the blood cholesterol, blood lipids going up, the increase in the thickness of the blood, and the increase in blood sugar, and the blood coagulation. So it contributes to all these diseases listed below. Hypertension, coronary heart disease, heart failure, arrhythmia. See, you talked this morning a lot about AFib. So there it goes. And stroke. Now this slide, I really don't expect you to be able to see, read, or understand. I don't even know what all of these acronyms stand for. I haven't researched that. But I show you this because I want to tell you about the study. In Germany, in the Gutenberg Institute, they did a complete research project to assess the effects of noise on the body. And they discovered exactly what it was doing in the body. And they did this with having mice in the lab that they exposed to noise on a regular basis. And then they sacrificed the mice and found that within the blood vessels, the lining of the blood vessels, the epithelial cells, lining of the blood vessels was being damaged or destroyed. So we have blood vessels all over our body. So that's why it's causing all of these effects in our body. And they list all the diseases below, as we've already mentioned, in terms of the effects. Largely, the cardiovascular is the biggest effect. I had the good fortune to have some Zoom meetings this past year with one of the researchers at the Gutenberg Institute, because when I read about this study, I had envisioned, gee, I wish they could have put some earmuffs on those ears of the mice to see if they blocked the noise here, did it help in terms of the blood vessels? Well, during this Zoom, I raised this question with this researcher, and he said, that's an interesting question. I'll see if I can get some funding to be able to do a study where we block the ears of the mice and really find out how this noise is penetrating the body to damage the blood vessels. So I hope that they are able to get the funding. I'm very interested in seeing what they find out. So enough of this complex slide. But when I learned about this effect on humans, this really made me get on my soapbox and want to change the world in terms of reducing noise. So the diseases. Now here's a picture of the body, and we label this the non-auditory effects because we've already talked about the effects on the ears. And so we start at the top, and there's effects on the cognitive, the brain, etc. They have blood vessels in the brain. And these the effects are in terms of problems with learning, psychomotor function, response speed, attentiveness, memory, recall, etc. And leads to then problems, diseases with anxiety, depression, dementia. They've done several new studies now showing that people who live in noisy areas have higher rates of dementia, important to us who are getting older. And annoyance and aggression and decreased helpfulness. Next, coming down, difficulty falling asleep, awakening, decreased sleep quality, fatigue, and headache. And of course, we know that not sleeping enough leads to dementia, depression, heart disease, and stroke. And then when they talk now about preventing dementia, the big three are exercise, diet, and sleep. So we know that's important. And then, surprisingly, it contributes to low birth weight babies, too, the occurrence of prematurity. And it also contributes to overweight and obesity and metabolic diseases, which precedes the diabetes. So it's really comprehensive in terms of its effects on our body. Now, everybody pays attention to dollars, and the impact on lives. Now, WHO in Europe has done so much good work in this area. They're the ones collecting the data. They're the ones supporting studies. They're the ones finding solutions. A million years, healthy years of life lost due to traffic noise in Western Europe. 61,000 years of life lost due to ischemic heart disease. 45,000 due to cognitive impairment in children. 903,000 years of life lost due to sleep disturbance. This is annually in terms of the effect on healthy years of life. 146 million Americans at risk for hypertension. And then Rick Neitzel, who's in the School of Public Health here at U of M, and his team did a study that documented that the U.S. would save $3.9 billion annually by reducing the noise-related hypertension and heart disease. And this is only reducing the high blood pressure by a few points. And I can't tell you which politician it was, but one of them in Washington said $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and it counts up to real money. Well, to my way of thinking, $3.9 billion is enough to be concerned about, and we should be. So, okay. There are some particularly vulnerable groups. Children and adolescents, seniors, as we all are more vulnerable. Veterans with PTSD, the noise can be a real trigger for them. And the people with autism spectrum disorders, sensory processing disorders, hearing damage, and attention deficit are all more vulnerable to the noise exposure. My clicker, there. Now, I mentioned earlier on environmental justice. And by that we mean the people, the lower income and minority persons are more apt to live in high noisy areas. The ones in the path of air and train and traffic, and less mitigating, less changes in that environment to establish controls over the noise. I did read this winter, and maybe some of you know a lot more about it, the group trying to get sound barrier walls along 14, I think it was, here in Ann Arbor, to protect the elementary school children nearby. And the last I read about it, it didn't happen. Is that true? I thought that was the result. But there's plenty of studies that show that kids on the side of the school with the noise do less well in tests and learning. And if they correct that noise, as they did in a study in New York City, putting sound barriers on the wheels of the elevated trains, the kids did better after that. Their scores and learning improved. So there's plenty of proof for it, but there's not been enough done in relation to protecting or changing the environment so that those who live in those high noise areas are protected and are not getting so much noise exposure. Now, Washington Post has said, and I thoroughly agree with it, that this environmental noise exposure is becoming the new secondhand smoke. Why is that? Well, you can't really control it. It's imposed on you, and it's damaging your body. So it's certainly true. Now, Pat did warn me that this was after lunch. So, but I'm not a great joke teller. My husband is the joke teller in this family. I could have, if I'd thought ahead, I could have asked him to stand up and tell a joke to help you wake up from lunch. But one joke I can remember was about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And Adam disappeared all day. And when he got back, Eve said, "Where have you been?" He said, "Oh, I was just walking around." "Well, what are you doing? Just walking around. What have you been doing?" And he said, "Just enjoying the garden." And she said, "Have you been with another woman?" And he said, "Eve, you know there are no other women in the garden." And she said, "Step over this way. I want to count your ribs." So it does affect other than humans. It disrupts animal communications, and this is important for dolphins, whales, etc., and land animals as well as the marine one I mentioned. The habitats and their reproduction and their predation in terms of their getting their food to survive. And it negatively impacts the health and vitality of wildlife populations. They too have a stress type response in animals. And they too have PTSD type symptoms in animals. And it contributes to losses in biodiversity then, because it damages different groups of animals in different ways. So what's happening in the world? I've already mentioned that Europe is so far ahead of us. They are measuring the effects of the noise, all those years of life lost that were measured and presented. They're testing. They're testing various mechanisms to reduce the exposure. Exactly what the U.S. needs to be doing. And we need to try to get the U.S. to do that. So what is being done about it? I want to give you an example of a couple of resources. One of them is the DNC resolution. I don't know if any of you know Michelle Dietrich, who lives here in Ann Arbor. She's the chair of the Council on Environmental Health and Climate Change for the Democratic Party. And I felt that they were not looking at noise at all in terms of when they considered environment. So I had a wonderful opportunity to sit down and have lunch with her and share this information about what noise is doing to our bodies and give her written materials about it. And she was wonderful. She was sold. And she said, "Send me more materials and what you think might go into a resolution. And she will work on it." Well, she and her team just took the ball and ran with it and developed this wonderful resolution. I have a few copies if some of you want to look at it later. And it was approved then by their Council on Environment. And then it was approved by the entire Democratic National Council. It was accepted by them last February. Not this past year, one before. And she has told me that if there's enough grassroots support for this, that it would become part of the platform of the Democratic Party. Well, if any of you are Democrats and you're going to the convention, or if you know people who are, if you could provide support and encouragement regarding this being part of the platform. And they've done a wonderful job in preparing it. It's somewhat lengthy. There's almost 2 pages of whereases in the language of resolutions, which in the whereases, they're giving all the reasons. Some of the ones I've mentioned and others in terms of what the effects are of noise. And then a number of resolutions. Now, they, of course, need to be quite wordy and complete in their resolution language, and that's what's up here. But the essence is that it's to be a significant problem. It's costs tens of millions of Americans in dollars, and particularly the environmental justice communities that we've talked about, and that something needs to be done about these causes, and that federal support and guidance is needed to implement strategies in terms of getting health equity. Now, we know that there's higher rates of disease and disability in the low-income and minority communities, and we know, too, that they have more noise. So there's a connection. And they also identify the biodiversity and the harms of noise pollution. The third one encourages Congress to promote the reduction of environmental noise and to fund this agency, the Office of Noise Abatement and Control, which is part of the Environmental Protection Agency, which hasn't been funded for a long time, so that they can develop a national strategy and plan to improve these approaches for the country. And then that they recognize that it's important to determine where you put things. The tools for infrastructure to take into consideration the noise pollution when they site buildings. And I was pleased to learn that the committee that works to evaluate sites for location of schools considers noise in the area as part of their criteria. So that is great. Now, another resource is Quiet Communities. And I mentioned that I am on the advisory board.
I'll try again, I don't know.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Sorry about that, folks. I don't know what I did. We'll hope it doesn't happen again because it's not a pleasant noise. So back to Quiet Communities. They're a wonderful nonprofit agency. I happen to be on the board, the scientific advisory board of the organization, but it was formed 10, 15 years ago, and Jamie Banks is the founder and the president of the organization. She started it with her own bucks to get it going and was concerned about the noise in the community, and what stimulated their action was leaf blowers, gas-powered leaf blowers, noisy, and edgers, also noisy, with a number of communities who outlawed them completely, and I was pleased to see that Ann Arbor is going to phase out the gas-powered, which will reduce the pollution from the gas as well as from the noise. So that's great. So as founder and president over these years, I want to share with you what the kinds of things that they have done. I showed you before this policy that's on the books, the law that's on the books for our country, and is not being handled, nothing's being done about it. So it's been now 7 years since they petitioned the EPA to try to get them to act on this noise reduction. They've sent an open letter to the Department of Transportation. They've responded to the Federal Aviation Administration research plans, an open letter to EPA, and comments on the EPA strategic plan for 2026, letters to congressional committees, conferences on noise, infrastructure, et cetera. So therefore, trying to publicize the problem and trying to get something done. And recently, pleased to share that they filed a lawsuit against EPA saying, hey, this noise is on the books. You're charged with doing this. You're not doing it. So we'll see what happens with that. But I feel good about it. So also, just hot off the presses, the Scientific American Journal article this past week where they interviewed Jamie Banks about how she got started in this nonprofit foundation. And they also, she makes the plea in this article about using earbuds and smartphone apps because that's the way you can find out if the level of noise is too high where you are. Now, I did talk with the the executive director, Jamie, and the executive director, Trish, I'm sorry, and the founder and president, Jamie Banks, about if you were interested in working with them and doing something, how would this happen? And coming to each table is this sign-up sheet. Now, their dues are now $50 a year. And I thought that it might not be something that everyone here would want to spend their money on. So their response to me was that Quiet Communities wants to be sure that all who want to join as members are welcome. If the membership fee is not affordable, please share your name and address on the form I've provided, and the fee will be waived. If you have any questions, please email at info@quietcommunities.org. So John's passing out one of these to each table so that you can sign up if you would like to be part of this group that's trying to change the world. So. Now also in that same article, the main two people who were interviewed were Jamie and Rick Neitzel from our School of Public Health, who's done so much work in this area. And so it's really home base in terms of the Scientific American article, and excellent article for you to read. Each of you can have one of these brochures or flyer, whatever, about Quiet Communities and what they're about and what they're doing. And the more people who are concerned and active about the noise levels, the more likely we are to be able to get something done. So what can we do about it? Well, we can protect ourselves individually with the earplugs, muffs, and as I mentioned, getting an app on your phone. Almost everybody has to have a phone now to survive. And it's a free sound meter, and you can look and see what the levels of noise are where you are. And you really don't want it to see it over 70 decibels, which it will show on that meter. Unfortunately, there's not really good studies about exactly what decibel level's okay either. But we know that 70, if you're in an environmental area, should be okay. Reduce the noise at its source, which is what I'm trying to encourage happen. Now, I did do my research in the factories in terms of preventing noise-induced hearing loss while I was on faculty. And I became very aware that the standards, even though they have been set by the Occupational Safety, Health, and Administration and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, in terms of what the workers can be exposed to, those standards are planning on at least 8% of the workers getting hearing loss. They are not setting the standards low enough to try to prevent it in everybody. That's what the feds have done for that. So whether 70 is magic or not, we aren't sure. We don't have all the data. By individuals in your community to promote reduction in your community, like the people working on the noise levels in Ann Arbor in relation to protecting from the noise of 14. And communicating your concern to state and federal representatives. By what's needed at the state level is more assistance from the federal level, because it doesn't make any sense for each state to do its own research about what's the harmful noise level, what's the effective ways to reduce it, et cetera, et cetera. So the federal government, we need the information and guidance for state and local governments. And this DNC resolution I mentioned, all those whereases contain all those things that need to be done in terms of knowing what's going on and how it's harming us. So we've gotten sort of to the end of my soapbox, and I'm interested in your thoughts about it in terms of comments, ideas, questions. Yes, go ahead.
Just a basic question of what is the noise level in a factory, manufacturing, stamping, manufacturing, versus the road construction guy with the jackhammer? What kind of noise decibel level are you talking here versus when you put on the earmuffs? Does it really bring it below 70, or do the ear protectors provided only fit certain heads? And this is our standard size. Pops down to your bed.
Right.
Can you
Well,
repeat the question for the group and for those online?
Sure.
Thank you.
She was asking about the decibel levels for the various equipment in the environment versus in the factory, and do the earmuffs or earplugs really work? And what we do know is that it does reduce the exposure to noise wearing the earmuffs. We do know that sounds as loud as a shooting range or something like that, you should have earplugs and earmuffs together to really be effective for the really loud sounds. And that would be true if you were close to airport with planes taking off and so on. That gets up to the high levels too. And so they do help. They do prevent the noise from entering into your ears, damaging your hearing, et cetera, et cetera. And the Scientific American article suggests that this will also help to prevent the cardiovascular, et cetera. I don't know if this has been proven because those mice didn't have their ears blocked. And so I really want to know that. But it's certainly true that it will help to protect in terms of the hearing and potentially in terms of all the other damaging effects. Yes.
Yeah,
Did
when
that
I
answer your
think of-
question? Sorry, did that answer your, okay.
When I think of noise, I think of collegiate and professional sporting events, and maybe even professional auto racing or motorsports.
Right.
So I'm wondering what your thoughts about what we should do or what others should do about noise at these events.
Well, I hate it that U of M flashes signs at the football stadium. Even though we haven't been going to the games lately, I still have my season tickets and I have friends and family using them. But I hate it that they flash noise. I hate it at the hockey games where they flash the sign, noise. They want you to make noise. They don't know or understand or care that it's harmful. So I agree that that's a problem. And certainly using the commercial earplugs can be effective if you use them right to protect you. It doesn't take care of the other people. You can get your own custom-made earplugs, which is what I got and carry with me. My motto has always been, don't leave home without them. And I put them in the movie theaters. I put them in at sporting events, et cetera, et cetera. And if it's a really loud sporting event, which I consider maybe the auto racing is, that muffs and earplugs would be appropriate to wear at the same time. You need to have an audiologist do a mold of your ears because, believe it or not, your two ears aren't even the same, your ear canals. So they need to do a mold of each ear. They send it into a company, and you get your earplugs back. Actually, I have a daughter-in-law who's an audiologist, and her sister's an audiologist. So I got kind of a deal. But do you remember what, and then during my research projects, we did get some made in the audiology department at U of M, and that was many years ago, and I don't know exactly what, I mean, that was a deal for the research project. I don't know exactly what they cost there. But it can be worth it, certainly, to save your hearing. And I think, I don't know if it's around $100 or not, but you certainly could ask at the audiology department in terms of what they would charge for doing that. And I don't know if the on-the-street audiologists do that or not. Pat, did you have a question?
I had a statement. It seems to me in our discussions between the two of us that you had said that, I know, and you stated here that Europe and the other countries are doing much better. Did you tell me about some places where they actually set decibel levels that places were not allowed to go above?
Europe is certainly doing that. Europe is also requiring, in terms of what's sold as equipment, that the decibel levels are publicized. And they have standards to be met by household appliances, any other equipment that is being sold. And to my knowledge, we don't have any of those standards in this country.
I have just an observation. Someone back here has the app, and right now it has been registering 61 to 65 on the decibels. So I just thought that was.
Yes, there's this low-level sound coming from the AC or whatever, fans, whatever. Yes.
How do the custom earplugs compare to, say, a good set? Okay.
I have not seen any research exactly comparing those.
Could you repeat the question? It didn't come out through the
Oh,
mic.
sorry. Bill's asking about how does the effect compare between the commercial earmuffs or earplugs or the personalized ones that you would have made. And certainly the personalized ones are going to be the best because your ear canals are different. And even though you may have tried a number of different earplugs to see what seemed to be the best fit for you, we know that the ones made for you are going to be the best fit. The earmuffs occlude more sound than earplugs do. So if you wear the earmuffs, then they're going to cut out more sound than certainly the commercial plugs. I don't know of any studies comparing the earmuffs and the plugs made for you. So she's got a microphone back there, so go ahead.
Hi, I have a question. One of my pet peeves is going into a public restroom and they have those air-blown dryers that have to be 100 plus on the scale. Do you know who we would write to about that? I mean, they're everywhere.
They are everywhere,
Yeah.
and I have different times complained to the establishments that put them in,
Yeah.
and I have developed the habit, unless it's freezing cold outside, to just shake the ice, or not the ice, hopefully, the water off my hands and skip the drying. Or I find, like at Meijer and some of those stores, where there's a snack area, I go out and use their napkins to dry with. So
And
I
it's-
don't know what you mean. I share that concern.
On a side note, you're not supposed to use those. They taken them out of U of M hospital. You're supposed to use paper. They blow germs around. But anyway, I do have a question, so I'm going to jump in here. A lot of new parents are using those sound machines in their baby's room. So, but then I know my daughter's in-law is an audiologist, and she did that, but then she also has the child have earmuffs for other things. So what is the take on using those sound machines? Because I thought it was odd. She was using one, but then using muffs for other things.
That seems a bit contradictory, doesn't
Yeah.
it? But I don't, when my son was growing up, we didn't have sound machines. and I'm not aware that the grandkids have them either. I don't know exactly what decibels those are set at. So I think that would be important, and I would assume maybe she would have looked at it in terms of what the decibel level was. If it was very, very low, then you would presume it would be okay and can be sort of soothing. There's also groups looking at the noise of children's toys. And this is mentioned in the Scientific American article too, that some of those toys have huge decibels and they shouldn't be on the market. And parents have found ways to tinker with them so that either the batteries go disappearing or they find a way to cut off the sound coming from this dinosaur or whatever that roars to reduce that sound level. So it takes some ingenuity if the kids are going to have those toys. So go ahead.
Well, I noticed when I'm driving, and there's a lot of road construction being done right now, but the concrete is so much noisier than the asphalt. And when you go over a bridge, it's concrete, and then all of a sudden it's asphalt, like on 23. And is that being done to reduce the noise level, or on purpose, or is that just an economic thing to replace it with asphalt?
That's a really good question. I don't know, but it would be interesting to have the answer.
It would be
from
nice to have all asphalt.
highway construction. So she's saying for the bridge expansion and contraction with the weather changes, it's got to be concrete. But I'm sure there are ways to make it more or less noisy, too. And of course, they also talk about the importance of not having all your windows down while you're speeding down the road, because there's a lot of noise from the wind and the pressure.
Thank you for your work. I appreciate it. I'm a musician. I'm sensitive to noise. But what I found, and this is my wonderful revenge, Ann Arbor Rec and Ed has exercise programs, but they're sponsoring a Shine, which is sort of like a jazzercise exercise facility. And I understand they're trying to open more franchises or whatever throughout the United States. But their music is absolutely horrible, and it's above 70 decibels. So be careful when you exercise, and I know a lot of the instructors like to pump up the music. It's not doing you any good, and I find that sort of a interesting conundrum, you know, that they're not aware.
Right. I would share your concern too, and I have in the past asked them when I was doing a aerobic dance class, please turn down the music. Don't have it so loud. But a lot of times they seem to think that's essential.
I was wondering if anything has been done with the university to cut out the large artificial music in the football stadium and elsewhere that's clearly above any safe levels.
Certainly, I think comments have been submitted. I don't know to what extent they're heard. I think it's very good news that the U of M marching band uses earplugs. There are earplugs designed for musicians, and they are using them in the cymbals and the percussion department. So I think that's a very good sign.
That I can appreciate that. It's the matter of when the band isn't playing, you can't hear yourself speak, and it seems like the music is at a dangerous level. And I'm not sure if the university itself has been thinking about these issues.
I have heard that the university is considering and moving toward not using the gas-powered lawn equipment in that department, which is very good. My colleague in the School of Nursing, Dr. Marjorie McCullough, had contacted the department that handles all of the landscaping in the university, and they had agreed to move toward at least the quieter equipment. So, and I think the way to influence the university is for all of us to say something to them in terms of the sporting events and so on with all the loud noise. Yes.
I want to thank you. This is so interesting, and I'm so really impressed that your career has just centered around this. And I wondered if you could share with us how you got interested in this, and you're continuing it now. I think you're retired or semi-retired, and you're still at it. And I also wonder if you can talk about this sort of elusive process of prevention. Like, people deal with a problem once, hearing loss or things like that, and how you appeal to people and processes, and if you think that the future of this is really in the hands of politicians and regulations, or maybe written into collective bargaining or whatever. But I just wondered if you could talk a bit on
Sure.
about the best efforts for
I'll
the
take the
future.
last part first. I think individuals can do what they can do to protect themselves, and I've tried to outline some of those ways, and I've also talked about the advantages of the personally designed earplugs. And so the individuals can do that. Individuals can also influence policy, laws, etc., and I think that's so important for us to do, to be heard and to get the message where somebody can do something about it. And I think so much has been done with central governments in Europe that we have to do that in this country to provide the data, because we can't have each county, each state or whatever trying to figure out what's safe for those residents. So that's why I talked more about some of the political action that I think is needed. And in terms of how I got into it, I started the occupational health nursing program in the School of Nursing, and I did research in relation to respirator use and hearing protection use, because the research that had all been done nationally by that time, funded by the feds, was in terms of the efficacy of the equipment. Does this work or not in the lab? Nobody asked the workers, will you use it? Are you using it? How do you decide whether you use those earplugs or not? And so that was how I got into that research in my faculty career. And then after retiring, I became more concerned about the noise levels in the environment. And also, because they found out exactly what it's doing to the body now by studying the mice. Granted, they can't use humans to do these kinds of studies, but mice provide a good simulation. And once they found out what it was doing in the body, then I really wanted to get on my soapbox and try to change things. And yes, I want to retire more, and I'm going to quit writing articles about it, but I really appreciate the opportunity to share the information with you and to try to convince you to take action for yourselves and for the world.
Yeah, I had a question.
Sure.
Whenever I raise this issue with people, I always get the same response, which is, it doesn't bother me. So I'm curious if there's ever been any research done on how prevalent it is in terms of proportion of the population. It seems like very few people seem to be bothered by it.
And I think we see that a lot with young people who think, oh, that's an old person's disease or whatever. And I do know from my work in occupational health that, for instance, the people who work in the coal mines just presume that they will lose their hearing, and when they retire, they get $1,000 or $2,000 cash for that damage that they sustained through their workers' comp kind of thing. And so therefore, it's just a bonus for when they retire. They don't think at the time, when they're younger, about how not being able to hear is a big disadvantage.
Do you?
And I think that's true of young people now, too, with the electronic equipment. So, they're not concerned at that age.
We had a question. Do you have any apps that you would recommend for people to use to monitor decimals? This was it was specific to an Apple Watch. There was something on it, but do you have any ones that you would?
I just have gone to my Google app and put one on my phone. I can't even tell you what brand it is.
Okay.
But I have an Android phone, so I don't have the Apple. And they're made for both kinds of phones. Right.
I just Googled sound decibel meter and it popped right up. It was free and it was easy to load, and I can see what the sound level is in this room. Actually, I guess maybe that leads to another question. You said you want to keep it under 70, whereas the sound level in this room is ranging between 62 and almost 70.
Right.
That this room doesn't seem all that loud. Is 70 really not that you'd like to do that? But what can you give us kind of a range? At 70 is not good, but 90 is really awful. I mean, can you give us some frame of reference on that?
Well, that's part of the data we don't have. We don't have good data about just where that line is. The federal laws in relation to exposure at work relate to both the decibel levels and the time of exposure, because both are important. How many hours too. So it's not just the decibels, but it's how long are you in it. And if you have tinnitus, any ringing in the ears after having been in a noisy area, then you know you are really susceptible. Some people have a temporary threshold shift, they call it. After they've been at work, they then go home or ready to go home, and they cannot hear as well. And so if they're tested. So that means they're very susceptible. But that's what's done in the work site. So, yes.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry. Is it the ear canal that starts to decay, or
Well,
you're losing your sound?
the hearing organs that you have in your ear, the canals and the 3 bones that sends the message, the hair cells that sends a message to the brain, are all fed by the vascular system. So if you don't have the good circulation there, because of the damage to all the blood vessels, then you're going to have reduced hearing. So it's not the ear canal per se, it's really the 3 bones, the hair cells, not the ear canal going in from the outside, but it's what's inside the ear. Did that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Oh,
I don't know how we are in time, but you're a timekeeper, right?
8 minutes.
I try to save a lot of time for discussion and questions.
It always bothered me in a different sense, like if you're working night shift and you're in a hospital, the people that can't get sleep, it used to always bother me how people aren't cognizant of all the noise they're making, disturbing people. So, changing our behavior, thinking, this is their sleep time, we gotta be respectful.
on the flip side of that, U of M is going to single rooms in the hospital, and they ask us to keep it quiet, but the machines make a lot of noise too.
Yes, certainly. I had an interesting experience one time being kept overnight in a hospital room that was adjacent to the emergency, so I wasn't really admitted at U of M. But it turned out that the loudspeaker was right outside that room for when they were paging people. And the supervisor who was on duty's first name was Sally. So all night long, I was hearing, Sally. So that was not a quiet night or a sleepful night.
Can you speak to the new headsets that are more, their bone conduction or whatever versus going in your ear?
The noise reduction headphones? No.
So it goes over your ear and it sits
mhm.
here for you to hear for like your Walkman or your phone or your music. Does that cause more?
It all depends on the volume level that you have set, yeah. And of course, the length of time using, too. So. Well, thank you very much, and I hope each of you will go forward and be an activist.